I stumbled upon 3 terrifying true night drive horror stories that will haunt your dreams. I never should have opened that door. Not ever. It was one of those nights, the kind where the air feels thick with dread, and shadows stretch unnaturally behind you. My routine was simple: drive home after a long day, the familiar streets lulling me into comfort. But tonight, something was different. As I cruised down that winding road, the lone streetlights flickered like dying fireflies. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around my car like a cold, clammy hand. I could sense it, something lurking just beyond the reach of my headlights. The whispers of wind carried indistinct murmurs, teasing at edges of my sanity. Each soft rustle in the underbrush made my heart race. Suddenly, a chill crawled up my spine when I saw movement, quick, fleeting, just a glimpse of something in my rearview mirror. My breath caught in my throat. I drove faster, the tires gripping the road like a frightened animal. The strange noises intensified. Was it the rustle of branches? Or something more sinister? I strained to hear over my pounding heart. The air thickened, tasted metallic on my tongue. My palms were sweaty against the steering wheel. I glanced around, my eyes darting to the darkened fields beside me. Shadows danced just outside of my view, twisting and turning in ways that made no sense, like they were alive. A chill whispered through the open windows, carrying a rancid stench that turned my stomach. I blinked hard, trying to shake off whatever was creeping into my mind. Just then, I heard it clearly, a low growl, echoing through the silence. Panic surged in my chest. I could feel my pulse throbbing in my ears, drowning out every other sound. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my knuckles white, desperately hoping to outrun whatever haunted me. Then, the headlights flickered and died. Darkness enveloped me, a suffocating blanket. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing. My breath quickened, and everything went silent, deafeningly so. In that stillness, I felt a presence. Eyes watching, lurking just beyond the veil of night. Was it my imagination? Or something that had been waiting for me? A sudden movement outside my window made me jump. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. And there, mere inches from my face, stood a figure, a shadowy outline against the night. I opened my mouth to scream, but all that escaped was a strangled gasp. The figure stepped closer. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure loomed just outside my window, its form obscured by darkness but exuding a palpable malevolence. My breath caught, a cold knot of fear tightening in my gut as it drew closer, tilting its head as if inspecting me like a predator sizing up its prey. The stench of decay wafted through the cracked window, suffocating me with its intensity like rotting leaves mixed with something far worse, something that clung to the back of my throat. I fumbled for the door lock, my fingers trembling, but the mechanism felt foreign under my desperate grip. A soft sound emerged from the shadow, almost like a whisper, yet punctuated with an unnatural resonance, a language I could not comprehend, but one that twisted the fear inside me. It was as though the figure was beckoning me, inviting me into its darkness. Suddenly, behind it, another figure appeared. This one was smaller, hunched, swaying slightly as if caught in a spectral breeze. It took a step forward, revealing a face, if it could be called that, void of features, a pale canvas where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. It extended an arm, fingers elongated and grotesque, pointing directly at me. An overwhelming wave of despair washed over me, as if an unseen weight pressed down on my chest. "Get away!" I screamed, my voice cut through the paralyzing silence like a fragile wisp of hope. I slammed the car into reverse, the tires screeching against the asphalt as I jerked back, desperate to escape this nightmare. For a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of their features, an impossibly wide grin spreading across the Shadow's face, eyes suddenly ablaze with the glow of pure malice before they flickered out. I was met with the oppressive blackness once more, but I couldn't afford to look back. The road twisted before me like a serpent, the headlights dimmed into nothingness. I could hear the growl again, more guttural, a warning echoing in the void that surrounded me. The weight in the air grew heavier, pulsating with malevolence, as if the darkness itself came alive, watching, waiting for the moment I would falter. As my car careened forward, I barely avoided the gnarly branches clawing at me from the side of the road, their twisted limbs reminiscent of skeletal hands reaching hungrily for my escape. The whispers grew louder, muttering unintelligible phrases, blending with the low growls that reverberated down the rhythmic beat of my heart. It was a symphony of dread, commanding my attention, eroding my sanity. Just when I thought I had distanced myself from that twisted tableau, the air clarified, and a new sound pierced through the chaos, a rhythmic thump, growing closer, punctuating the space behind me, an ominous drum of footsteps that echoed against the still night. They were coming. I could feel it with every ounce of my being. With a desperate flick of the wrist, I turned on my high beams, flooding the road with blinding light. But the illumination did little to disperse the darkness creeping in around me. Instead, it cast bizarre shadows along the edges of the woods, contorting them into grotesque shapes that danced and writhed as if they possessed minds of their own. Something shattered the stillness, an animal, perhaps. But no, the unmistakable sound of something inhuman pounded through the rushing air, clawing its way deeper into my psyche, that's when I spotted it. A figure stood still in the middle of the road, silhouetted against my headlights. Or was it just another trick of the light? I blinked hard, but the figure remained, an indistinct form with arms outstretched, almost welcoming me. With frozen fear, I couldn't dare move. The shadows around it flared, reshaping every moment of uncertainty into a horrifying tableau of nightmares, a painting of impending doom etched in the dark. My grip slackened on the wheel as the horror of the scene stung my eyes, the whispers melding into a singular phrase that curled around my consciousness: "Join us." I opened my mouth to scream, but my voice failed as a chilling realization crashed over me, one that shattered everything I thought I knew. In a collective movement, all the shadows around me twisted towards the figure in the road, beckoning. And just like that, my headlights flickered again, plunging me into suffocating blackness. When the lights returned, my mind screamed in silence. The figure was suddenly right outside my window, face pressed close enough that I could see every detail, the hollow eye sockets carved with wicked delight, and that grinning maw stretching impossibly wide as it uttered words I wished could be unheard. The last thing I remember was the moment the door creaked open with an unnatural force before my world went dark. Then, in the silence, a laugh echoed into the void, a sound all too familiar. It was my own. I woke up on the side of the road, the gravel biting into my skin as I peeled myself away from unconsciousness, gasping for breath. Panic stormed through me as I scrambled to sit up, hands trembling uncontrollably. The moon hung heavy in the sky, gnarled branches overhead stretching like grasping hands, shadows twisting and curling at the edges of my vision. The car was nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the night as if it had never existed. My heart thundered in my chest, and somewhere in the distance, the whispering grew louder, a cacophony of voices overlapping, their words indistinguishable but pregnant with menace. I staggered to my feet, glancing around, desperate for recognition, for a sign that would guide me out of this waking nightmare. Instead, I found only the darkness swirling around me, thick as fog yet cold and oppressive like a shroud. The atmosphere hummed with malignant energy, making my skin crawl. "Hello." My voice cracked, tiny against the overwhelming silence. But no answer came, only my echo mingling with the whispers that seemed to fluctuate like a sinister heartbeat. As I took my first unsteady steps, I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find the woods completely still. My breath quickened, then, as I strained to listen closer to the whispered words, one phrase began to rise above the rest, clearer, resonating with a chilling finality: "You belong to us." I stumbled back, heart racing. Who were they? My feet responded with instinctive urgency, carrying me along the roadside as memories fragmented in my mind, swirling around my thoughts like leaves caught in a tempest. Images of the figures flooded back, long limbs, ghastly smiles, hollow eyes. It felt like they were lurking just behind the veil of darkness, waiting for their chance to strike. The weight of dread sat heavily on my chest. As I pressed forward, the whispers morphed into laughter, a cruel and haunting sound that reverberated through the trees as though the very night was mocking me. I felt the threads of sanity beginning to fray, the panic urging me to run faster, further, anywhere but here. But every step felt tethered, a binding force clawing at my heels, demanding I turn back, demanding I embrace the darkness. Then, in my moments of sheer terror, the ground shifted underfoot, the iridescent glimmers of tiny eyes reflecting the moonlight flickered under the brush. Something was slithering in the undergrowth. My breath caught again, heart pounding a frantic rhythm as I turned to face the encroaching horror. From the shadows emerged a creature, hunched and grotesque, its flesh rippling like rotting fabric. It raised its head, revealing a mouth that split open far too wide, adorned with a labyrinth of jagged teeth. "Join us," it whispered, and that voice, it was deep, reverberating through my very bones, a sound that rooted me in place. Before I could scream, the creature lunged. I stumbled backward, narrowly missing an outstretched hand, claws slicing through air. My instincts screamed at me to run, yet I felt rooted to the spot, a screenplay of dread played out in my mind. Just as I turned, seeking the sanctuary of the tree line, my shoe caught on a gnarled root, sending me sprawling, the impact jarring through my body. I hit the ground hard, gasping for air, looking up just in time to see a dozen figures emerging from the shadows, each more horrifying than the last, creeping toward me with outstretched arms, eyes shining with unholy glee. "You will never escape," they echoed, their voices weaving into a horrific symphony that twisted my thoughts into a chaotic frenzy of despair. The worst realization clawed at my throat. I couldn't feel the ground beneath me. The earth seemed to swallow its own depths, pulling me down into an unseen void. Clawing at the ground, I cried out, fighting against the force pulling me backward toward the waiting darkness. But they continued to advance, the figure's split mouth widening again, chanting their macabre invitation. My panic escalated, and with all my strength, I surged forward, breaking free from the grip of the unseen force and sprinting through the trees. I dared not look back, focused only on putting as much distance as I could between them and me. No matter how fast I ran, the sound of their laughter pursued me, echoing off the trees like the cruelest mockery of hope. Then suddenly, the unspeakable truth emerged before me. I had stumbled into a clearing, and in the center stood my car, a beacon of false hope, yet it was surrounded by swirling shadows that pulsed and twitched as if alive. I sprinted towards it, dreading the moment I would be snatched again, the futility of my escape pressing heavily against my mind. My hand slid against the smooth surface of the car, but just as I reached for the handle, the laughter crescendoed into a cacophony, reverberating around me like thunder, and then the ground beneath me fractured. A chasm opened, dark and yawning wide, swallowing everything around it. The figures around me shrieked in unison, their features melting together into a singular horror as I felt myself teeter on the brink, sliding slowly toward that beckoning darkness, the whispers now erupting into frenzied screams. "Join us! Join us!" My grip faltered, and as I plunged into the void, a hand grabbed my wrist, fingers like iron, anchoring me momentarily above the abyss. I looked up, realizing with a sinking heart that it wasn't my own hand holding me back, but rather the grotesque face of the creature looming above, urging me into the darkness below. In that split second, my scream became a laugh, a twisted reflection of my own, as I tumbled into the endless black. I fell deeper into the void, the wind howling in my ears as I was pulled further away from anything resembling reality. It felt like I was descending through layers of despair, each moment stretching into eternity, each grim whisper reverberating like a taunt in my skull. The swirling darkness began to feel alive, wrapping around me with the chilling caress of a million frigid fingers. That I landed with a bone-rattling thud on a damp, cold surface that absorbed all warmth from my body. The air around me was thick with a stench of decay and something sweetly metallic, flooding my lungs and threatening to choke me. Fear coursed through me, but in that instant, all I could hear was the deafening echo of their laughter mingling with my own frantic breaths. Welcome home, a voice whispered from the pitch blackness, oozing with mock warmth. Something brushed against my ankle, a frigid caress that made my skin crawl, and I sprang to my feet, my instincts warring against my mind which screamed for action. Tentatively, I began to move, my eyes straining to pierce through the suffocating blackness. It felt as if things were watching me waiting with an insatiable hunger. With each step, I heard shuffling, the sound rising like a dreadful crescendo, a chorus of feral rasping as if a multitude of bodies were inching closer, silhouettes forming in the darkness. "Where are you?" I cried, my voice trembling but defiant. The scattering of my words into the void felt futile, swallowed before they could connect with anything. Shadows shifted farther back, undulating with anticipation, their forms faintly reminiscent of the grotesque figures that had chased me just moments prior. As my vision adjusted, faint luminescent shapes glimmered in the distance, like the sickly glow of dying stars trapped in a sepulchre, revealing the contours of this unholy abyss. I began to walk once more, drawn toward the light, though it was distinctly unnerving. Each step whispered promises of safety, but I felt the tether of dread. The darkness behind me was thick, wrapping around my heart like a vice. Then I saw them, sprawled along the ground, faces frozen in horror or perhaps ecstasy. People no, souls trapped in an agonizing limbo. Their mouths moved, but instead of words, garbled cries escaped them, meaningless yet filled with anguish. They looked at me with hollow eyes, beseeching me, yet their bodies were twisted grotesqueries, rotting from the inside out as they clawed helplessly at the soil beneath them. "Do not listen," one hoarse voice rasped, breaking through the oppressive quiet. "They'll take you too." I can't. I managed, urgency gripping my throat. "What are they? What do they want?" "Us," another voice echoed, a chilling harmony. The shadows behind me pulsed, as if taking a breath, the darkness swelling with intent. Suddenly, I was seized by an inescapable compulsion to look back. A surge of dread choked me as I turned, revealing a wave of those ghastly figures cascading toward me, a torrent of malformed hands reaching hungrily out, their eyes glimmering like polished black stones. The laughter returned, a cacophony that chimed with the suffering souls I had just witnessed, the two sounds mixing into an intricate web of madness that threatened to snare my very soul. I stumbled back, retreating into the proximity of the bodies, desperate for a sliver of comfort, yet I knew there was none to be found. Within moments, one of the grotesque figures lunged, its image heating reality distorted and feverish. "No!" I shrieked, but my own voice sounded distant, as if coming from an unrecognizable point in the vast emptiness. Their laughter crescendoed as I fell back into the rotting embrace of the souls, their grasp cold yet seething with a desperate energy that pulled me further into a maddening swirl. Hands began to grasp at me, pulling me under, and I fought against it without knowing if I were striking against the living, the dead, or both. The stench of decay thickened around me, forcing me to fight against the inevitable as I was dragged toward the opening of the void, the gulf between life and this sinister realm widening, threatening to consume me entirely. In a final fleeting image, I saw the creature's face, its mouth stretched wide again, revealing a hollow expanse dotted with teeth like a jagged graveyard. "You can't escape, you're one of us now," it echoed hauntingly. As my vision pulsated with crimson dread, I felt the darkness close in around me until it became a suffocating shroud, and just as I thought I might be swallowed whole, I awoke again, this time, on the back seat of my car, which was parked on the side of the lonely road. The moon blinked at me through the windshield, but the world felt wrong, strange. My breath echoed in the silence, and as I struggled to process the disorienting reality, I glanced around. There, in the rearview mirror, behind the echo of my own shadow, stood a figure, its face etched with that familiar, ghastly smile, eyes wide with a knowing light. "Welcome back," it whispered, but it was not just a greeting, it was a warning. The realization struck me like a thunderbolt: I had not escaped. Instead, I was part of their web, caught eternally, and something inside me began to stir. As I locked eyes with the figure, the car groaned under an unseen weight, the engine idle as the shadows moved again, crawling closer, the whispers resuming their sinister allure, enveloping me in the familiar chant. "Join us." Panic surged through me as the world outside the car seemed to tilt, the scenery a blur of darkness and flickering lights. The road, once my lifeline, became a jagged gash through the desolate night, and I could hear the rising hum of the engine echoing my frantic heartbeat. The figure remained behind, unwavering, its smile a grotesque invitation that twisted my gut and wrapped my thoughts in a vice grip of dread. "Go away!" I shouted, unable to comprehend whether I was addressing the apparition or the growing sense of despair creeping inside me. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the tires screeching defiantly against the asphalt, but when I glanced back, the figure was still there, as if it had melded with the air itself, a spectre born from shadows. The car surged forward, yet the road stretched endlessly, page after page of darkness unrolling beneath my wheels. Trees loomed like sentinels, branches clawing at my windows with skeletal fingers, their whispers merging with the voice still echoing in my mind. "Join us. It'll be different this time." I blared the horn, a desperate sound that reverberated through the stillness, but all it brought forth was more silence, a silence laced with held breaths, waiting, watching. Time felt distorted, each second dragging like molasses, and the heaviness of the air thickened around me, clinging to my skin like a shroud. In the rearview mirror, the figure seemed to shimmer and multiply, the smile expounding grotesque shadows, as if more were crowding in behind it, writhing and morphing into shapes that defied logic. I blinked rapidly, my heart slamming against my ribcage, fighting against the looming horror. "Get out of my head!" I screamed into the void, but the evoked chaos only deepened, a cacophony of nightmarish laughter bubbling up around me. The trees began to swirl together, twisting in the periphery of my vision, dripping with shadows that began to envelop the vehicle. I turned the wheel in frantic circles but could feel the car being pulled, like a moth to an unseen flame. The laughter increased, a symphony of insanity that threatened to invade and consume everything I had ever known. Then I felt it, a coldness, creeping in through my skin, wrapping tight around my bones, squeezing the breath out of my lungs. The dashboard flickered, warning lights igniting in erratic bursts, but instead of panic, a peculiar calm swept over me. Within that haze, whispers rose from deep inside, calling me to concede, promising me relief from the torment. "What do you want?" I gasped, the question rolling off my tongue like a prayer. The interior of the car grew dense with shadows, distorting the fabric of reality itself. "Your essence, your truth," the figure rasped, its voice intertwining with my doubts until they became an unholy union. "You've tasted the void. Now we will share it, and you will never feel alone again." I could scarcely breathe, dread and despair coiling tighter around my throat. The shadows morphed into faces, twisted visages of the souls from the void, their mouths stretched wide in silent screams, pleading for release while their hollow eyes gleamed with the knowledge of fate. They reached out toward me, their fingers curling around the air with a hunger that sent ice skittering down my spine. "I refuse. I refuse." I cried, shaking my head violently, but the haunting harmonies dripped into my consciousness, seducing me as the darkness thickened around the vehicle, smothering me in its chilling embrace. Suddenly, the windows began to frost over, intricate patterns blooming like veins on a heart, pulsing in rhythm with the whispers. I could hear them now, not just in my mind, but with a palpable insistence, thrumming through the metal walls of my prison. "Join us. Embrace the darkness. It will be your shield and your guide." The car jolted violently, and the tires slipped out from beneath me, skidding toward the edge of the road. My heart thundered in protest as the descent into the unknown loomed ahead, a chasm of inky oblivion waiting to swallow me whole. And then the engine sputtered, halting suddenly, leaving me adrift in the thickening blackness. A feeling of inevitability gripped me, and as I looked back, the apparition had faded, leaving only a void where it once stood. But the shadows pulsed, undulating with malignant energy, and I realized this was T/As. I gripped the steering wheel, gasping for breath, an icy hand pressed against the back of my neck, sending shockwaves through my body. No. Not again. Desperate, I wrenched the car to the side, but it was too late. The ground dropped from beneath me without warning, a spiraling descent into a darkness deeper than I had ever known. The last thing I heard was the echo of their laughter rising to a fever pitch, drowning out my screams as I plummeted into oblivion. In the silence that followed, something stirred in the very fibers of the car, breathing new life into the void. The darkness smiled, and I was trapped, once again, suspended between realms, on the brink of becoming something other than human. And as the engine roared back to life, I comprehended the final truth: I had not merely stumbled upon their world, I had become a vessel for something far more wicked. "Welcome home," I heard the drowned voices murmur, and in that moment, I understood the true horror of my existence. The road was not just a path, it was a prison. And I was no longer its occupant, I was now one of them. As the car's engine thrummed with a sinister vitality, I sat in numbed disbelief, the vibrations resonating through my skin like a pulse from the very heart of darkness. Shadows quivered and stretched, coiling like snakes around the car, filling the space with a malevolent presence that no longer felt foreign but intimately familiar. I had crossed a threshold I could never return from. Suddenly, an unseen force yanked my focus to the rearview mirror. Beyond the glass, the void breathed inhale, exhale, echoing the disembodied laughter that had dangled just out of reach. The faces I had seen before were imprinted in my mind, their expressions contorted into a grotesque semblance of glee and anguish. I could still feel their icy fingers ghosting across my skin, urging me to step closer into their realm, to embrace the shadow that sang to my soul. As I glanced around the interior of the car, I began to notice subtle changes. The edges of everything appeared soft, draped in layers of shadow, as though the very essence of reality was melting away. The familiar contours of my surroundings distorted, warping into a landscape of despaired whispers, a realm where fears manifested into ghastly forms. I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged within me, thick and suffocating. With each fleeting glance, the figures outside seemed to multiply, filling the rearview mirror until it was an amalgamation of horror and hunger. "Help us!" Their mouths gasped soundlessly, their eyes roving in frantic anticipation. "No!" I screamed, thumping against the steering wheel in a futile effort to wrestle back control. But the darkness only coiled tighter, smothering my will until I felt submerged in it, like a man drowning in despair. Outside, the road writhed and twisted, pulsating with the rhythm of human suffering, inviting me to dive deeper. "What is happening?" My voice trembled as the shadows thickened, twisting into tendrils that slowly snaked around the steering column, slithering towards me with an insatiable yearning. The filament of fear surged, elevating to a screeching crescendo within me. Then, just when I thought I might scream, my voice raw, my surroundings shifted once more, the car suddenly erupting with blinding light. It flickered and hummed like faulty wiring, illuminating the grotesque parade of souls stationed just behind the glass. The light twisted their figures, casting elongated shadows that clawed at the interiors of the car, spindly fingers reaching out for me, yearning to pull me into their depths. "Let us in!" they chorused, their echoes flooding the space with intoxicating despair. "You belong with us." As if entranced, my eyes were drawn to a singular figure standing apart yet radiating dominance over the rest. It was adorned in thick rags, a spectral monarch draped in chains of darkness, its eyes hollow but burning with malevolence. I could feel its gaze boring into me, a predatory hunger that rendered me powerless. I focused on the outside world, my last thread of sanity clinging to hope. In the distance, the feeble glow of a distant town flickered, like a beacon calling me home. Frantic, I hammered at the gas pedal, but the shadows only tightened their grasp, pulling the very engine's essence into their abyss. Suddenly, my surroundings exploded into chaos. The car lurched violently, as if caught in a vortex, the lights outside distorting and flickering in a grotesque dance. The laughter became deafening, filling my ears with unrelenting ghastliness as the darkness enveloped us, swallowing the horizon whole. With horror gripping my throat, I realized I was not alone anymore. It felt as if dozens had entered the car with me, invading my personal space and suffocating my freedom. Their murmurs became louder, layering over one another in a monstrous symphony. The wretched manifestation surrounding me stared back with burning desire, each pair of hollow eyes promising pain, release, and understanding of a grief far too profound for earthly comprehension. "Welcome back," the shadowed monarch said, its voice a rasp of forgotten dreams slipping through my grasp. "It's time to accept your truth." The engine sputtered again and died, plunging us into a deafening silence. In that moment, reality frayed and peeled away, the air thick with the scent of decay and despair. I felt the weight of the souls, each desperate for vindication, clawing at my sanity, searching for their savior or their next victim. And then, silence shattered. The car lurched forward suddenly, an overwhelming force pushing me against my seat, sending my heart racing as I realized we were no longer in control. We were simply witnesses, spectators in a ceaseless performance where the shadows wrote the script. "Now you will see," the monarch intoned, its smile stretching impossibly wide, teeth glistening like gleaming blades. As the shadows enveloped me completely, a shuddering chill seeped into my bones, and I braced for the unimaginable truth that lay ahead. And then darkness crashed down within the car, and I understood I was no longer myself. They were here, waiting for the moment to ascend, and I was about to find out exactly how deep the void truly goes. The silence was a void that thrummed like a heartbeat, an aching pulse deep in the marrow of my existence. I was lost now, untethered in an abyss where the thin veneer of reality evaporated like morning mist under the weight of the encroaching shadows. The car, once my sanctuary, had morphed into a prison, its walls closing in around me while alien whispers slithered through the air, each syllable a fragment of despair and anguish that echoed relentlessly in my mind. Then, like a heavy curtain drawn aside, visions of the past began to bleed through the cracks of my consciousness. Flickering images splattered across the void, visceral and vivid. I saw moments stolen from my life, my childhood home, the playground where laughter had once echoed, now replaced by silence, dark and foreboding. Shadows had twisted themselves around the playground equipment, forming grotesque figures that mimicked the playfulness of children. They laughed in low, guttural tones, inviting me to join their game, beckoning me with bony fingers stained with sorrow. "Join us," remember the figures sang, their joy twisted into something grotesquely alluring. Familiar faces from my past wavered in and out of focus, trapped in a mirror that reflected not just my life but the echoes of longing and regret. A single tear trickled down my cheek, the tangible sadness tinged with an unknowing desire to embrace it. In the distance, a fog began to roll in, thick and suffocating, transforming the darkened world outside the car into a gray nightmare. The ghostly monarch leaned closer, its smile sharpening as the mist encroached further. Shadows began to pool, swirling around the car in a sickening dance. I could see them now clearly, faces twisted in demeanor of those whose destinies had been bound, loyalties forged in blood and sorrow. Their mouths barely moved, yet I could hear their desperate pleas, reverberating in the silence like church bells signaling doom. "Let it go," they urged. "Surrender to the embrace of this world. It's better here." A low rumble erupted beneath me, and the floorboard trembled. My heart seized as cold dread rippled through my veins, the truth hit me like a freight train. I could feel my body teeter on the edge of something irreversible, a precipice so dark that to step forward meant to forsake everything I had known. But there was more. The thing within me, the congregation of shadows that had nestled deep in my subconscious, stirred. It flickered like a flame starved for air. They were awakening. I could feel them scratching at the corners of my thoughts, gnawing at my will like ravenous wolves. They craved release, craving to be drawn forth into the light that they had been denied. "Can't you see?" the monarch rasped, its voice echoing like a dirge. "You have always belonged to us. Their hopes, their sorrows, everything is intertwined. Accept it." With a frantic urgency, I slammed my eyes shut, trying to drown out their entreaties. The shadows outside roared in response, their magnetic force thrumming against the windows, transforming the car into a cocoon of dread. The discordant laughter infused the air with an unbearable tension, reverberating against my ears until I couldn't discern my own thoughts amidst the chaos. Suddenly, the passenger door swung open, revealing a storm of darkness swirling with violent energy. My breath hitched as a figure materialized from the void, an abomination wrapped in shadows, its form indistinct yet solid enough to exude an overwhelming menace. It stepped inside, cool air swirling around us, and I was drenched in a rush of pure horror. My fighting spirit crumbled as I fell back against the seat, pressed into despair as the clear, pinpricking desire to flee seized me. What do you want?" I gasped, the faintest trace of rebellion surfacing as panic clawed at my throat. Your truth, of course, the figure echoed, its voice a chilling harmony with the others still surrounding the car. Time to remember. With those words, the shadows flooded into the car, enveloping me in a stifling shroud. The temperature plummeted, my breath visible in icy wisps as the memories began flashing once more vividly and violently than before. I gasped as they tightened their grip. Wretched images played like a reel: the moment I had failed those I loved, the breath that had caught in my choke as I lost them, the echo of their last cries mingling with the shadows. Let it out, the figure urged, and I felt myself cracking beneath its weight. It was too much a memory of despair forged into the now, purity corrupted by grief. The car swerved violently, a dark cacophony rising as skeletal fingers brushed against my face, tracing patterns of anguish. An icy chill wrapped around my throat, squeezing tighter until I could no longer breathe, suffocating under the weight of my own guilt. Just when I thought I might slip into the void forever, the battening triangles of light that danced through the chaos grew stronger, illuminating the contours of the shadowed figures that surrounded me. And then, with a brutal wrench, everything fell silent. The realm outside vanished, replaced instead by an endless dark void. Just as I gathered myself for one final act of defiance, I was pulled deep into the shadow of the monarch, whispering secrets that clawed at the walls of my sanity. Suddenly, I was screaming a name I had buried long ago, as from beneath me, I felt the harsh grip of the abyss lurch violently, dragging me down into the inky depths of something far more terrifying than I had ever imagined. And in that moment, the world shattered anew, my scream echoing into the darkness, tiny shards of reality crumbling as the void swallowed me whole. The darkness clung to me like a heavy shroud as I plummeted, the fabric of reality ripping away beneath my weight. My scream dissolved into the void, silencing the echoes of the past, twisting them into an unsettling cacophony that assaulted my senses. Each fleeting memory bled into the next, forming a disturbing tapestry woven from the essence of pain and regret, an endless loop of the lives I couldn't save. Then, just as abruptly as it began, the descent stopped. An oppressive stillness settled around me. I lay on the ground, my heart racing, breaths coming in frantic bursts. The taste of rust filled my mouth, warm and coppery, awakening a deep-seated fear that crawled just beneath my skin. Slowly, I pushed myself to sit up, wiping blood from my lips, unsure if it was mine or a remnant of this phantom realm that I found myself in, a grotesque parody of my own childhood home, the very place that had once been my refuge. The walls bore the scars of time, peeling paint curling like dead leaves, and the air crackled with a thick tension, electric and foreboding. Shadows lurked in the corners, their presence palpable, stirring uneasily as if they possessed a will of their own. As I stood, something shifted in the room. A whisper floated through the air, wrapping around me like smoke. "You are home," it hissed, the voice laden with malice, yet laden with an eerily comforting familiarity. "This isn't home," I choked out, my voice hollow as it echoed in the empty space. "It can't be." But the magazine clippings from my past tugged at my consciousness, a collage of smiling faces and hollow victories scattered across the floor. Each image morphed slowly into something grotesque, the smiles twisted into grimaces, the memories bleeding into a morass of despair. I stumbled backward, colliding with a wall of darkness, the shadows twisting eagerly at my feet. They craved my surrender. The door leading to the hallway creaked open, revealing a long, dim corridor that beckoned. I hesitated, pulsing terror clutching at my heart. But instinct propelled me forward, an inescapable force urging me to confront whatever awaited me. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, an echo of laughter mingling with my hesitant footsteps, taunting and seductive. As I moved deeper into the gloom, a sudden chill cut through me, the air rich with a sense of dread. I felt their eyes upon me, the forgotten, the mournful, those who had waited in limbo, betrayed by their memories. "You're one of us now," they whispered, their words weaving a haunting melody that resonated in my bones. Finally, I reached the end of the corridor and pushed open a door that creaked ominously, revealing a room bathed in the glow of flickering candles, each flame dancing with an almost sentient vigor. In the center of the room lay a mirror, its surface reflecting shadows instead of light. I stepped closer, drawn irresistibly to the ghostly images swirling within, figures twisting and contorting in a grotesque ballet, each face a distorted reminder of those I had failed. Suddenly, the surface of the mirror rippled, and amidst the shadows, I could see a figure stepping forward, a familiar silhouette that made my heart skip. "Help me," it pleaded, eyes wide with agony. It was my sister, long gone yet painfully alive in this waking nightmare, her image marred by the malevolent darkness that held her captive. "No!" I screamed, slamming my fists against the glass. "You're not real. You can't be." But even as I shouted, her face morphed, twisting into an expression of malevolence, lips moving but the sounds lost in the chaos around me. My heart thundered against my ribcage as I was struck by the suffocating realization, I was not simply an observer, this was a reflection of my own soul, dredged from the depths of my regrets and failures. "Join us," her voice slithered through the shards of glass, dripping sweet poison that seeped into my mind. "You can't escape who you are." "No!" I cried, stepping back, but the shadows surged forward, stretching their gnarled fingers toward me. "You're dead. I didn't save you." My mind raced. Drowning in grief and guilt as the tempest of memories battled within me, the mirror's surface warped, and the shadows from the room converged on me, their howls blending into a storm of anguish, pulling me closer to the mirror where my sister's eyes locked onto mine, sorrowful, accusing, alive with a hunger for vengeance and resolution. Just then, the floor beneath me buckled, sending me plummeting once more into the unknown. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the swirling darkness, helpless against the tide threatening to drag me back into a place worse than death itself. When I landed, the ground was eerily soft beneath me, like flesh yielding to weight, and I felt warmth, too much warmth underscoring my terror. Lifting my gaze, I found countless eyes gazing back at me, pulsating and wet with desire, hungry for my pain, for my soul. "Let her in," they chanted in unison, as shadows writhed and coalesced, the familiar figure of my sister emerging once again, stepping toward me. "Let me in," she whispered, the mirror shattered behind her, shards flying like arrows, a violent reminder of everything I had lost. And just before I could turn to flee, her hand stretched forth, darkened with a shadow so thick it obscured her face, no longer a plea, but a command that would change everything. I felt the air thicken, pressing against me, as if the walls themselves conspired to keep me trapped in a vortex of despair. The moment her hand reached for me, reality splintered. Her ghastly visage loomed closer, the pleading glance replaced with something sinister, slathered in malice. "Let me in." Her voice rang sharp, slicing through the ambient horror like a knife. Behind her, the shadowy figures heated up, pulsing with anticipation, their eyes glittering with an unholy hunger that struck an irrational fear deep within me. I sensed they were not merely echoes of the past, but actually entities that craved a host, a vessel to carry their rancid sorrow. A scream bubbled up in my throat, but it didn't escape. Instead, it died there, suffocated by the growing clash of memories that assailed me. Moments of laughter from birthday parties turned eerie as the laughter morphed into wails that echoed in the cavernous gloom. The sweetness of childhood memories became rot, their sweetness curdled into anguish that I teetered backward, desperation clawing at the edges of my sanity. The shadows scattered, retreating for a moment as my sister's visage twisted grotesquely behind them. "You can't leave me," she shrieked, the sound unnaturally echoed, as if a dozen voices were combining into one, her voice rippling through my senses, filling my mind with horror that I turned and ran, tearing away from the grotesque mockery of my past. With a thundering heart, I stumbled down the soft, malleable ground, the flesh-like surface undulating beneath my feet as if alive, striving to consume me whole. I shot into a space heavy with despair and found myself back in the corridor, but this time it was different, longer, darker, an oppressive malice hung thick like fog that I dashed down the hall, praying for an exit, the long shadows elongating and retracting as though they were alive, writhing just out of reach. Each step was a chorus of whispers, enraged resentments unfurling around me. "You left her," they hissed, "you abandoned her." The floor seized my ankles, gripping with a gelatinous, unbearable weight, words slurred and melted in my mind, the memories fused into something altogether unrecognizable. I craved genuine escape, I needed to breathe the air of the living, to escape this twisted purgatory. But a familiar knock pulsed beneath the facade of despair, an echo from the end of the corridor. It stopped me cold, sending needles of ice dancing along my spine. Help me. It was the voice I knew all too well but tinged with a desperate edge. It was my sister's voice but not her spectral apparition demanding entry. This was the real plea, echoing desperately for rescue from the abyss. I hesitated, the fingers of doubt squeezing tighter around my throat. Was this a trick? Was this darkness yet another luring facade, crafted to ensnare my sanity? But before I could decide, another unmistakable voice joined hers, layering over it for a brief instantiation. It was the voice of my mother, resonating with sadness. Help us, my children. It'll be better, just let us in. The shadows surged again, swallowing the hallway lights. I found myself drawn into that moment, an overwhelming power overtaking my thoughts. Desperation clawed at my being, pushing me toward the source of those imploring cries, but as I took a single step forward, the floor shifted, creating a chasm that formed beneath me that I barely managed to grab the edge of the gaping void that threatened to consume me. Yet when I peeked into the abyss, horror erupted as I peered down. Eyes went wide at the sight of dozens of faces, twisted and contorted, reaching out with hollow gestures and void-filled gazes, pleading and accusing. My mother and sister's faces twisted among them, trapping them in their own despair and desperation. Let us in, they chorused once more, suspended between existence and annihilation. With every ounce of strength, I pulled on the ground, fingers slipping wildly, nails digging into the flesh-like surface. No! I screamed, a sound like sirens tearing open the blackness. I pulled myself back onto the solid ground, feeling the ancient ache of sorrow in every fiber of my being, but they weren't finished. The shadows converged once more, giving life to terror and pain, gliding closer, feeding off my sorrow, whispered lies swirling in the air like a deadly mist. You will never escape. You will join us, they rasped, their voices mingling, morphing into a malicious symphony of despair. My heart raced as I felt the gap beneath me grow wider, the weight of the eyes below me pulling me inexorably toward the pit of horrors. In a moment of sheer instinct, I turned to run, but the corridor began collapsing, as if the very fabric of this twisted world fell apart, tumbling into chaos. I bolted for the end of the hall, but as I sprinted forward, my sister's hand shot out once more, clutching the air, coating it with fogged memories. Let me in, she reiterated, her voice becoming a death knell, resonating within my head, profound, surrounding me, and just as I reached the door at the end of the corridor, it burst open, and the shadows exploded forth, consuming everything in their path. I felt myself sliding, tumbling into the spiraling void, my sister's grasp pulling tighter around me, heralding a descent I could not combat or escape. And then I fell forward into a room, the cold marble tiles freezing under my skin, an echoing laughter vibrating beneath me as the voices rose in feverish crescendo. I recognized a face before all went dark, one last glimpse of my sister, hollowed eyes illuminated with a newfound power. Welcome home, she breathed, and then the room plummeted into silence. The darkness pressed around me like an endless tide, thick and heavy with ancient secrets and the scent of decay that gnawed at my sanity. I was back in the room where it had all begun, yet everything felt different. A sickening weight of familiarity clung to the air, wrapping around my throat like a noose. My mind raced, grasping at threads of reality, trying desperately to remember how I had escaped the last time, but the memories were slippery, tinged with a dread that threatened to swallow me whole. Then I noticed the figures in the corner, shrouded in shadow. They flickered in and out of existence, each mirroring the horrors etched deep within my own soul. Those ghastly faces, they were the lost souls who had once begged for mercy, the echoes of their sorrow crashing against me like waves, each one a bitter reminder of my failures. Join us, they whispered, their voices blending together in a macabre lullaby that chilled me to the marrow. Instinctively, I stumbled backward, but as I turned, the door I had just come through disintegrated, melting away into darkness. Panic surged within me as I darted for the remaining exits, but every attempt only led me circling back into the depths of despair. The walls pulsed with a life of their own, closing in like predatory hands yearning to seize me. There was no escape. In that suffocating moment, a thought crystallized in my mind. This was not merely a nightmare, it was a trap. A trap woven from the very fabric of my memories and regrets. Fingers quivered over my heart, squeezing it tightly as understanding dawned. I had become the very shadows that haunted me, a vessel for the sorrow of those lost, and then I remembered the truth, crashing down like a tidal wave, drowning me under its weight. I had been running from my own darkness all along. I had condemned myself by denying the very essence of who I was, rejecting the grief that had twisted me into a spectre of pain. It wasn't just the souls despairing in eternal servitude, it was my essence, my spirit intertwined with theirs. I was one of them. A figure stepped forward, leading the tide of shadows. It was my sister, her form both familiar and grotesque, coated in layers of darkness, calm yet commanding. "Welcome back," she said, and each word resonated with power. "You once believed you could escape the truth, deny your place in our realm. You thought you could unmake what you have become. You can't do this." I wailed, yet my voice was swallowed by the storm of shadows, an eerie reflection of my futile rebellion. "Move away from me." But, as I uttered those words, I felt an unexpected warmth inside me shift, a flicker of acceptance stoking to life, igniting a connection within me that I had long buried. "Join us," she beckoned, not from a place of malice, but from acceptance. "You belong to the darkness. It is where we thrive, where suffering is transformed into power." The shadows pulsed and began to swirl around me, their cold tendrils slipping beneath my skin, curling around my essence. Unexpectedly, a tingle of comfort washed over me as memories flooded back, not just of grief but of moments spent in joy. Echoes of laughter and love intertwined with the sorrow, a haunting nostalgia that coalesced into a truth I had been desperate to forget. My ties to the living world were severed, yet here was a family I had never wanted to acknowledge. That I felt a sinister clarity take hold, pervading my thoughts. The darkness, once a prisoner I loathed, became a sanctuary, embracing me as I sunk deeper into its grasp. "You will see," my sister implored, her eyes glimmering with a wild yet familiar fire, and it was in that wild gaze where I finally saw it, the truth illuminated within darkness and despair had always been waiting for me. I could possess both grief and acceptance. A soft voice called from the shadows. "You're safe now. Embrace it." As the tide surged higher, I surrendered to it, allowing the abyss to swallow me whole. In that moment of unequivocal acceptance, the cacophony fell silent. The shadows ceased their chaos, forming a membrane around me, welcoming and expansive, opening my heart to an eternal understanding that I had neither feared nor embraced. I was always meant to be the darkness and the light, but in a final chilling twist, the fleeting thoughts whispered into my mind pieces of a memory I couldn't quite grasp, fleeting images of a car speeding down the road of freedom, edging just out of reach. This wasn't over. Not truly. And then the darkness wrapped around me with all its cold embrace, murmuring soft promises, but a flicker of defiance ignited. I was not just a vessel, I could still choose. "Let me out!" I screamed without voice, and in a horrifying flash of clarity, I understood the darkness had merely been an extension of my pain, not my identity. With a surge of strength, I tore through the fabric of shadow, a cathartic rush consuming me as I began to merge the light within alongside the grief, finally becoming who I was meant to be. Suddenly, the car reappeared, a silhouette in the distance, headlights piercing through the layers of gloom. Without thinking, I lunged forward, heart racing as I stumbled toward it, its faint promise of salvation the last, absolute truth I could grasp. Just as a blinding light enveloped me, the voices crescendoed, "You cannot escape who you are." And everything faded into silence. As the world around me faded, I felt the icy tendrils slip from my grasp, only to be replaced by a frigid touch. As I opened my eyes, the revulsion washed over me, merging with a share of newfound strength. That I stood alone in the void, but I was not who I was. The darkness had not taken me, it had transformed me, but then, smirking behind an unseen veil, a familiar echo tickled my thoughts. A darkness lurking, always waiting. The road beckoned, the shadows whispered, "We shall meet again." And that realization gripped me. They had only shown me the path toward acceptance, while the depths of true horror lay just out of reach, waiting for the moment I dared to turn back, because the road never truly ends, it only loops back through the shadows, beckoning me home.